Language has a unique way of trapping us. It traps us by the words that we use and the words that are used on us. In neuro-linguistic programming, one technique of influencing people is using words that need to be accepted by the unconscious for the question or the statement to be contemplated in the first place. So as an example, if you said to a child, after you've cleaned your room, we'll go to the cinema. So this example obviously presupposes that they're going to clean the room, and it sort of slips under the radar. Now, you see this a lot with politicians who won't answer the question that they're asked, but before they sort of skirt round the answer, they'll make a statement ahead of that, and it sort of is often unchallenged by people who question them. So language uses things like that, but it's also more nuanced and subtle in the way that it can use its trickery. So assuming one of the things is to assume that something is wrong with you if you don't do something that everyone else is doing. So you're given a choice that's not a choice. You do what you're told, basically, or your freedom is restricted. So an example of this, when the UK government brought out the workplace pension scheme, which was to ensure that everybody had a pension that wasn't just the state pension. You had to opt out of the scheme. And of course, it wasn't easy to do that. So if you were self-employed and you already had a pension, but you were also doing some work for somebody else, like I was working in a school that then brought in a pension scheme that I was suddenly enlisted into, which meant I would have been paying 2 lots of pension. In the end, it was actually easier to stay in it than to opt out. Now, that tactic is called nudging. I think there was a book called Nudging that came out. So the idea is that the easy option is the one that they want you to take. Now, the idea behind this particular podcast was to pose a question: are you limited by the way that you are conditioned to think? Because it's obviously a rhetorical question, because you are, by its very nature. The whole point about rationality is that you are limited by what you can think. You can't go on a flight of fancy and come up with something that seems ridiculous. But of course, good solutions often come from outside. They don't come from the central part of thinking that everybody else is doing. So subsequently, you are limited by the way that you think. So putting this in an artistic context, I see this as a problem for most adults, maybe all adults in fact. Anybody that's been through the education system for long enough has lost that ability to have this sort of unlimited thinking. There was a famous experiment, which was the uses of a paperclip, which was conducted. I can't remember who actually did this experiment, but it was how many uses can you make of a paperclip? And the first time it's done is with young children. And then that experiment is replicated with older age groups. And of course what happens is that the use of the paperclip diminishes down to what the paperclip is sort of designed for. So instead of having countless ways of using a paperclip, you end up with just a handful. So in an artistic context then, why should a song have a verse and a chorus, verse, chorus, bridge, verse, chorus. And obviously the answer to that is, doesn't have to. Depends obviously what packaging you need to put it into. But I see that tripping people over when they are learning to write music, that they have to have a verse, they have to have a chorus, instead of letting the song develop. And why should it be like that? Do you need to conform by doing what everybody else is doing? So if you extend that back out again, have a look at the consequences of that artistically. You end up being able to do what everybody else does. But there comes a point in time where you don't want to be doing what everybody else does. You need to be able to do things that are different. And that's where the problem lies. So, the need to conform by doing what everybody else is doing, whether that's to buy a new mobile phone, going on a holiday, buying the latest fashion. Now, of course, you don't have to do any of those things. If you're creating a song, it can become anything. Any structure that fits the music is the one. So, drawing this back to, life choices. Who are you? And that is a question that, in a way, is unanswerable intellectually, apart from the fact that you are something already. And I would hazard a guess that that is exactly what happens with music. Say, a piece of music that you're doing, it's already the thing that it is. It's already the thing that it's becoming. It's like a seed. That seed will become a particular plant. It's already inherent within the seed. And that's actually true of us. But of course, the problem is we follow that creative thing about a seed. If you had a tree growing in a particular place, its environment could either stunt its growth or kill it, or it can flourish. And what I see so much with education is that people are stunted in their development of who they actually are. And I think in a worst case situation, it leads to mental illness. It leads to, in worst case scenarios, suicide. But just generally, a lot of people who are not happy. Great in order to sell them things. But I think it's very important actually that we spend more time accepting who we are and discovering who we are. And that, I've always argued, is best found in the world of the arts, interestingly. So on the podcast, there have been a number of occasions when I've interviewed people and they've made a statement of, I was so naive that I thought that I would be able to become a professional musician or whatever, or become successful at whatever. And that sort of naivety, I've sort of said before, is like a vital skill. It's a skill that the budding artist needs, because if you were to sit down and look at the odds of success, you wouldn't even try. And you'd be probably more open to doing the creative thing by being naive. So looking at this as sort of another way, it shows an unlimited style of thinking. A style of thinking that is expansive and creative and hopeful, which, is sort of like the right side of the brain. It's irrational thinking. Whereas, of course, the limited rational approach of the left side of the brain is the one sort of beloved of the education system. There is only one answer. And even if you get the right answer, you've got to show you're working in order that there's no heresy involved. It's not good enough just to know the answer. Whereas, of course, the right side of the brain can just have an idea that's out of context. So I would say that all of the problems that I encounter with people learning to play music or to write songs comes from this rational left side thinking, that sort of programmable stuff of the education system getting in the way and interfering with that sort of flow state. So another point here is, creativity is not a competition. And of course, creativity is best exemplified by cooperation and joint ventures and doing things because you just can, making something out of something broken or damaged, repurposing something, repurposing an idea, typically exemplified by punk fashion, being able to make fashion out of bin bags. On the other hand, competition is rational and it's limited and it's focused on the competition, or it's focused on the goal, focused on a single point. And of course that's demonstrated again, by the way that society thinks that we should operate and by the education system in itself. It's sort of like a sorting hat approach to the world, really. What is it that what house are you best suited to go into? Yeah. So here's another point. Here's another idea. Does consciousness actually create reality? There's a lot of evidence to sort of point to this. A lot of philosophical ideas about reality not existing, or as something fixed, that it's sort of movable and changeable. And many of us would understand that, we are pattern seekers as humans, and that humans can find patterns in things that sort of aren't there. This sort of idea of sort of confirmation bias. If you believe in something enough, you'll find reasons for and evidence for the reason why that should be true. But let's just take it, just take that idea of us, consciousness creating reality as being accurate and true for the moment. What does that give us? If that is true, that consciousness creates reality. I'm going to use the word life hack, but what does that give us as a way of being able to, in the Matrix sort of term, bend reality? In fact, there is a clip in the first Matrix film where Neo goes to see the Oracle, and there's these children who are, sort of gifted with sort of psychic skills and all the rest of it. And one of them's bending a spoon, and Neo tries to do that, and the boy says, "Don't try to bend the spoon with your mind. That's impossible. But it's a case of bending your mind, bending what you believe." And I thought that's the sort of thing that we're looking at. If you believe that things are possible, if you believe things, that the world speaks to you in some way, that you're not isolated, you're in a extraordinary ecosystem that's interdependent, then you can do some amazing things to your life. You can really transform your life, apart from the fact that you can make yourself happier, because there's a possibility of change for the better. And as you live like that, it's possible that other people can see that. And then obviously confirmation bias starts to kick in, and it becomes their reality. So that's not new. This is the basis of obviously a lot of religious thinking and obviously certain philosophies as well. So looking at the most one of the most bizarre religions on the planet, that of Scientology. L. Ron Hubbard sort of dreamt up this sort of crazy story that became the mythos of Scientology. And thousands of people sharing it with him. Oh, obviously he's not around anymore, and I'm sure that many would testify to the validity and its beneficial effect. Now, that doesn't make it real for us, but it does show us that there are limitless possibilities just by changing how you think and how you work and how you sort of create art. In fact, making your life artistic, or making your life more sort of magical in the way that it works. The rational part of your thinking is to plot a course through that and build a map of that new reality. But keeping all the narrative open to all its strangeness. So you want the logic to track a path in its territory. Do the science bit of, this is the process that you can build. There's an interesting quote that probably comes from Chaos Magic and obviously some sort of modern philosophical thought that nothing is actually true. And sort of postmodern thinking. I think it's interesting to sort of think, well, there's an ancient Chinese thing. I think it comes from the I Ching actually, which is that you don't have to believe in something, you just have to suspend your disbelief, which I think is actually probably more powerful, because it's not really a case of whether something is real or true. I know I've been talking about that, and that's the sort of purpose behind this talk, and I'm going to come back to language again in a minute. But I think it's really important to start to park certain things that we would term as an answer to one side. So it's a case of this sort of wonder of, that's possible. Let's think what would happen if that were possible. And then start to think about the possibilities of what you can do from that standpoint, and then bring them into some sort of physical action in your life. So let's say you've written a song, and you need a band to work with, and you start acting as if you've actually got the band together, and you start contacting other musicians and say, look, all I need is the guitar player, or all I need is a drummer. Starting to get a picture of how you're acting, or getting the gigs before you got the band, and so on. So you're already got that mindset in your thinking that you've got some level of success, some sort of cachet in the way that you operate. And I think this is actually important, because if you start from a viewpoint that you haven't got anything, it's almost impossible to get the wheels moving. As soon as you get something happening, even if it's just booking a rehearsal hall, something is happening, you know. So that's the sort of thing of getting those ideas out there, believing that, you know, you've already achieved something, and then starting to act on those things as if they're already in motion. So back to language. So it's actually very tricky to eliminate the sort of negatives in language. So to put a positive slant on the language that you use, not so much the fact that you can't do something or you failed. What's that? You know, epic fail, we sort of see. Crap. You know, take that out of your vocabulary. The sort of idea of failing forward is a better one, but take the failing out of it. Forward movement by making different choices. You know, think of ways of re-engineering your language. Tell people that they look good. If people ask you how you are, tell them that you feel great and you're really well. Don't do the not bad stuff. Get all of that out of your language patterns. Say yes to as many opportunities as you can. Again, this is something that occurs time and time again on the podcast with people that have become very successful at stuff. They just don't say no to an opportunity. Even if they don't feel they've got the skill for something, they'll just think, well, I'll just learn that as I go. So I think that's important. So looking at how you're using language, and how you're using language on other people, then look at how language is being used on you. So that brings me to the thorny issue of social media and the news in general. Sometimes the most incredible thing you can do for your health is not to watch the news in any shape or form, because, you know, I've not followed the news for a number of years now, and the things that you need to know about will find you. I guarantee it. Most of the stuff you're being told is nonsense, or is going to be, you're going to discover a little bit further along the line that some expert was wrong. You know, because of the sort of rolling news thing that we get, it's a never-ending diet of people's speculation. And good experiment for you is to find a podcast of news items, maybe like, say, here in the UK, you can do it with things like the Today programme. They used to do a podcast and then listen to it a week later and find out how much the experts were right. And you will realise that you could ask anybody on the street their opinion and they'll probably be as good as the pundits. Or it might be an idea just to watch the football commentary, you know, in the breaks with the pundits, and they say how good somebody's doing, and, you know, in the end, that team lose, you know. Yeah, it's sort of nonsense. So take that out of your diet as much as you can. Look at what you're spending your time on. And the other thing is, you know, start reading some, or listening to, if you're into audiobooks, things that really enrich you, whether that's your language that you use or the stories that you're listening to. Get things that will make you feel better. A little plug here for a friend of mine, Matt Ogden, who works under the name The Bearded Wit, has just or he's just finishing off reading The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, and you can get to that by searching The Bearded Wit. And it will take you to that Hitchhiker's Guide. Okay, that's a good laugh, and he does a great job of reading that. So there's a few things. So let's look at our language now, not by what it does to limit us. Let's take that out of the phraseology, and it now will be make your language unlimited. So on that note, until next time, see you again.